Hello and welcome to the podcast where we don't know what we're doing.
The recording has ended.
No, we've only just begun.
Nice. Well, we know it's episode 63.
Yeah, 1963 was the year I was born.
Really?
Yeah.
It was a very good year.
Right.
Was a very good year for summertime girls.
Yes, this is the podcast where you tune in to hear Mark and Greg poorly execute classic oldies. Like it's dusty classic oldies. It's not even classic oldies. I was talking to some friends on in my music group on metal about classic, and they were saying, yeah, the 90s.
Nirvana. I know.
And I'm like, yep, that's how old I am.
That I remember that day when I heard Nirvana on classic rock radio, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yep. 50. It's been 50 years since the 60s.
Wow.
More. It's almost 60 years now.
60 years for me.
Yeah. So, we're becoming increasingly irrelevant.
The wisdom in elders and the wisdom of babes. Which one wins?
Well, we're not elders yet. So there's that. We can still get away with some mischief.
I don't know. I think 60 is an elder. I feel like I've begun the elder path.
Yeah. You're a youngin' as far as elders go.
Right. And yet I'm in there. I'm sitting at their table.
That's right. You're not wearing diapers yet, which they're glad about.
Yeah.
Well, it's a privilege to get old. Beats the alternative.
Does it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Only the good die young, said Billy Joel.
Yeah, well, who wants to be good? I'd much rather be fun.
Can you be both?
I'm good and fun. The new candy.
Yeah, exactly.
Good and fun.
Chocolate coated good and funs.
You've heard of rubbing the Buddha's head. Lick my bald head and see what happens.
I thought you were going to just leave it at lick my bald
head.
Bald head. Lick my circumcised head.
Oh, dear. I knew that was coming, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Or gentlemen, since all the ladies have
less than 3 minutes into it, and Greg brings it down.
That's good, though, because I'm the overly buoyant one, and you're the overly gravitational one. Which puts us right in the sweet spot.
Amen.
Just under the head of the clit.
Just to the side.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we're both under pressure. Like I'm doing stuff. I have work to do, but not the least of which is to try to sign some more clients soon. And then Greg has lots of clients and he's got work to do. So this might be a short podcast.
Yeah, it might be a very short. I would be game for that. Gosh darn it. We could talk about how my mom is passing. And she's still in process. And she spoke to my eldest daughter the other day when she was still cognizant and asked that my daughter pray for a quick and peaceful passing for her. She's ready to go. She hasn't gone yet. And then my two sisters were down in Nicaragua with her. And they had to come home, and everyone was hoping that she would pass, including mom, that she'd pass while they were down there. And I'm sharing this because it's kind of funny, but my brother, the other night, I'm talking with him because I talk with him almost every weeknight, just as part of life, and he said, well, I thought of a pillow. And I was like, oh my God, I had the same thought. I thought that probably isn't appropriate to share. And we both had a chuckle at that. But it is interesting that there is appropriateness to that thought, and it's not appropriate action. Certainly no one's going to do it. But then we also thought of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and the famous end. Spoiler alert.
If you haven't read that book or seen that movie,
Right. then then I think we're pretty safe to say it's not on your list. And when, the big Native American gentleman suffocates him with the pillow, and that was an absolute right act. That was an absolute compassionate act. That was a loving act.
Well, and it's really hard to contemplate doing this with your mother, because on the one hand, it's like compassionate, but on the other hand, it's also really weird that this is how it's ended up with her.
Well, no one's going to do that. But that's the other thing is, one of my sisters shared this morning how, um, two people that we know of passed away, and lack of oxygen was part of the process, and it was very difficult for everyone, including the person passing, because in essence it was a very slow suffocation, and morphine hasn't been allowed to my mom, which, like, when my father passed, he was given morphine, and it, I think, helped him to have a very peaceful passing.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway,
my heart goes out to your mom and to your family, because this transition isn't taking its easy path. It's taking a difficult path right now. And I personally would not want to slowly suffocate and become more and more toxic all by myself, as the way I died. And so I feel for your mom's current physical state and the reality that she's experiencing. And, um, I sort of keep expecting you to call me at some point late at night or first thing in the morning and go, she's finally passed and I'm feeling it and I need someone to talk to. And I certainly want you to know that you can do that if you need to.
that's very kind. Thank you.
And,
I think we should cue Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan. I
that
feel
makes
for
no sense to me.
you.
What?
Her song, I Feel For You. I feel
Oh,
for you.
oh, that one. That's right.
I think I love you. Wasn't
Yeah.
that written by Prince?
Yep.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. They had a good relationship.
Yes, yes.
For a little while, which seems to be the story with him.
Well,
you only get a little bit of time with the purple master.
I was thinking about that yesterday. I heard like one of the people that was part of his place. I just forgot what it's called.
Paisley Park.
Yeah, thank you, Paisley Park. I swear I've got like brain anyway.
Brain fog. Yeah.
So a person, and they said that there was just women in and out, new women every night, just, and I was like, Prince really, like, he had a couple of serious relationships, but for the most part of his life, he kept it very solo.
Yeah. I find myself curious about that. As someone who considers himself, a relationship coach, I sort of sense that there was an inability for him to maintain intimacy. That's my projection of what happened.
Right, because I kind of project there was a lack of desire for long-term relationship. Because we both know that there's things that come with that are energy consuming.
Right. Well,
I think he liked the
he
freedom.
wasn't feeling no pain when he went down. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. But he was sure feeling a lot of pain that put him on that toxic substance.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So the third podcast in a row of your mom dying. That's where we're at.
Really? Been wow.
Right. So it's been 3 weeks.
Has it? That's crazy.
Of her passing. And it's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
But when you first mentioned it, the thought that came to my head is, she might be around for a while. The body's an amazing thing. That's not what the doctors are saying, huh?
Well, here's what I got to say to that. I have no fucking idea. And that's what I thought about death and love a few days ago. Like, it's two things that humanity, in our grappling for knowledge, it's two elements we have fucking no idea. We try to control it. It's just like, give it up.
We have nothing to do to hold on to any of it.
Yeah.
They are the ultimate lessons in surrender.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And there's our podcast title. The ultimate lessons in surrender.
Yeah.
Death and love.
Does your mom like to drink?
She liked drinking wine. She definitely didn't. I share that last week about how she had an imaginary glass of wine with her imaginary friends and she choked on it. And my sister texted us on WhatsApp like, what the fuck? She it's interesting because there's a lot of people of our age even and her age that kind of getting a little loose at night every night is part of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I was just thinking, what are the things that are available to her that could help her numb her pain a little bit?
Right. Yeah, I don't know if she could swallow right now. Last report I got, which was last night, I think, was she needed more oxygen and was unable to communicate anymore.
Okay.
And the last photo I got, which was yesterday morning, she looked very tired. She was sitting up, but she looked very, very tired.
Yeah, so it really is imminent now.
Yeah, really is.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wish her the most easeful transition possible, and that she finds the light and glory and peace on the other side.
Amen.
Yeah.
So what do you think is like, there's a couple of people in our life that have had mental breakdowns. I've had a mental breakdown in my life. What is the what do you call those strands that connect muscle and bone? And it's like the sinew,
Well, there's tendons.
No,
Fascia.
Fascia.
Yeah.
What is the fascia that holds mental thought to stable reality and crazy? Like what is the grounding of reality?
Wow. Well, there's something about fear that's very destabilizing. And so if there's an absence of real love in the form of both verbal and touch, it can become very destabilizing to our nervous system. And when one creates a mental construct where being fiercely independent and not needing or depending on love or touch as an ideal for oneself, as if that's the state that we want to occupy, we create a kind of impossibility for our nervous system to manage, because it's really not true that we are sovereign at that level. We are really ultimately best in community and best when we have nurturing and caring and touch in our lives. And so I think when there's no one there to comfort us in either of those two ways, that certainly contributes to a sense of isolation, which then ramps and cycles up the fear. Or if we do have access to that, we might not be willing to let it in because we've got a story going about what it means. And so meaning making is a big part of what the mind does, right? And so if fear is the engine, and then meaning making is the kind of the thing that the fear churns out, then it begins to ramp up this meaning of, oh, I'm going crazy. And then resistance builds and less peace is available in that. And so it becomes more and more of an intense experience. Like, it'd be fine if someone were just quietly, serenely going nuts in their house, and they had
Is
food and
that
water.
fine?
There'd be no visible signs of suffering at that point, right? But clearly, some of the people we're talking about, there are visible signs of discomfort and a lack of peace. So, depending on who you talk to, if you talk to a material scientist, they're going to say that that's a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that the whole key is to put the right chemicals in the brain. But if you talk to someone who's more of a holistic practitioner, they're going to say, well, there's that, but there's also the spiritual component. And what is the spiritual plane of this person's life like? And what's their relationship to esoteric phenomena? And along with that,
what's the gentleman's name that was kind of in tandem with, oh God, this name thing is really starting to bother me that I don't.
Get used to it.
Yeah, I guess so, because it's happening.
I've been reading about this. There's some things that we can do to help, but
all right,
they're
let's
working
get
on
into
this
that
problem.
a little later. This isn't a life coaching podcast. This is genocide. Who's the doctor who kind of is known for creating the science of mind and thought? And the whole
Oh, you
thing
mean
with
Steiner, Dr. Freud?
Freud. Thank you. All right, who was in tandem with Carl Jung?
Carl Jung.
Carl Jung had.
That's why there are two hosts.
Carl Jung had a mental breakdown that was very significant, from my understanding, to where he ended up in his, the breadth of writing and research that he poured out into the world.
Well, what I know about Freud was there was a fair amount of cocaine use in that life.
So much so that he gave it to friends as a Christmas gift.
Right.
He
And I don't
loved
know
it.
if Jung had that experience, but I know people who've had what we'll call a psychotic break from different kinds of chemical induced states in their bodies. And I would imagine that if you have a history of that the cellular abuse that's occurred could eventually catch up with you, and you could have some sort of break that's a result of the internalized damage, right? But I don't have any evidence to that. That's just kind of my take on it.
Like, my psychotic break was, I was around 18 or 19, and I don't think it was from, I was doing a lot of drugs, but I think
Were you just about to argue that you don't think it was about the drugs? Is that
yeah, I'm going to continue that argument.
Okay,
Your
good.
Honor.
This will be fun. Go ahead.
I think it was God, I really don't know.
Spiritual crisis?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's so vague. Because kind of the fulcrum of the break was me selling my soul to the devil, believing that that's what I had to do to be a rock star. And
right.
We were all dreaming of being rock stars. And it wasn't any religious, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I didn't do any ritual things. I just was hanging out on the deck.
Did you decide that you'd done that and that's what caused the break, is that you had decided that you had done that and you had regrets about it?
Well, my personal experience is that I did that. Yeah. And I really believed I did it. It was just a very casual, like, hey, if that's what it takes, do it. Okay. Then I had an experience that I believe was a change of character to a degree. Like, I would say my ego blew up, where I was everything and no one else mattered. And, I was winning games, like just games of chance, like backgammon, and people that I usually would sort of feel a little lesser than, I was feeling like, like
it's no coincidence that psychologists doing a bunch of cocaine came up with a concept of what a superego is.
Your Honor, I'd like that stricken from the record. um, what's the judge say when he goes, no, fuck you?
Sustained.
No, that's when he agrees.
Now it's my turn for the senior moment.
Well, it's both of ours, I guess. Good thing we're not lawyers, huh?
Yeah.
I am test. I'm obsessed. I am.
So what you're saying is you recognize that there was this aspect of what was happening that was secondary to the chemical composition of your bloodstream that had to do with this idea of your relationship to spirit.
Right. So then what was interesting is I remember there was sort of a change. And I think like the moment that I remember of things going from great to bad was Sid had gone off to university up in Humboldt. And I was like, yeah, he wasn't, he was too weak for the band. He couldn't be in the band. It's all working out perfectly. And he came back. And I was like, and I remember having an experience of like, fuck, this is my friend. Like, what am I doing? What is going on? And I literally threw up because I'll never forget that. I threw up from what I was realizing, literally. And then I went into very dark, paranoid place of fear, of utter fear, of where it was dark. And what's interesting
is did you pray for redemption during that phase?
Every day, Mark, every motherfucking
No, what I mean
day.
is during that deep dark phase at the time, do you remember praying for redemption and saying, can you save me from this deal I made with the devil?
I think that's been a part of my process of healing throughout the years. Absolutely. Literally.
But
And
not localized to that time frame that you're talking about right now.
no, I've done work on that. I've done work. I have done work with healers and myself around that moment of making that agreement. Yes.
Again, I don't think you're understanding my question. I'm going to try one more time.
Okay.
Right after you threw up, when you're in that really deep, dark space during that.
No, it wasn't. That's when I started the dive, I think, down into the deep.
So when you were in the down into it in that week or 2 days or 3 weeks or whatever it was, do you remember praying for redemption?
I don't know specifically about that incident.
So you didn't appeal to God to change the deal with the devil?
I have. I don't know if it was around that incident.
That's what I'm asking.
Right. So I would say no.
Just say no. I don't remember doing that.
I don't remember doing that.
It wasn't until later that you prayed for redemption.
Well, I think at that moment I was like, okay, I made a mistake. This wasn't a good idea.
Okay.
That's why
you weren't quite ready to turn to the big guy in the sky and
no. See, that's where.
Is this frustrating for you?
It is, because I think the big guy in the sky. Well, first of all, you and I both agree that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek phrase. So, and what cheeks they are, I must say. Speaking of cheeks, there's something about the feminine derriere that is a beautiful thing to caress. And anyway, I get it off topic here. So
is this a little uncomfortable for you? Do you want to avoid the subject now?
I am wondering why I brought this up. Like, what the fuck was I thinking?
We were talking about the origins of insanity and how you had a break that was related to how you thought you had made a deal with the devil and that you had inflated your ego and that it had nothing to do with the massive amounts of drugs you were using at the time.
Right. So
does that have any bearing on the folks? Like, I'll just say the person who I remember, we'll just say S, like that guy actually had a psychotic break as a result of amphetamine use. And I think that permanently damaged their brain.
Hmm.
And once that happens, any sort of predispositions that you have towards imbalance become more pronounced. It's like an injury that you never quite are able to throw again the way you used to. It's the
Right,
same idea.
right,
There is a
right,
physical component to it.
right.
And in the context of this conversation, there are three planes of existence that I think are relevant: physical, mental, and spiritual, right? And the physical and the mental are intertwined.
And the
And so,
spiritual isn't?
well, they are, it is, but the connection, the as you called it, the fascia, the connective tissue is a little bit different, right? So they all work together. So if there's illness in the form of mental disturbance, there's probably a combination of all three that are happening. And the mental piece is related to the physical because, of course, our mental activity happens as a result of our thinking, right?
Mhm.
And I know from myself that when I'm hangry, I'm not at my best, right? So that's a really simplified version of it, right? But when you add on to that the mental activity that we create around the ideas of what we think spiritual aspects of our life are, that can create a box. It can create a kind of flywheel for the fear to continue to rip through,
Right.
depending on what context you weave for yourself, right? And you had convinced yourself that you had made a deal with the devil, which,
Well, I didn't even convince myself, I just did it. It's like if you went and opened a door, you didn't convince yourself you opened the door, you just know you did it.
yeah,
Um,
okay. Well,
but so
as usual, those things are a raw deal. You didn't get what you asked for.
well, that's what's interesting in a stereotypical devil story. I
Right.
did, and then I got the raw end, like, and, but I will say that part of my journey in life is now I believe you can't really sell your soul. And it's an interesting thing when I think about, like, I've met someone who told me he experienced a real live exorcism, and he was telling me some stories of his experience in this hospital where a young boy was possessed. And I don't doubt this person. I don't think they were lying to me. So, in the contemplation of good and evil, and part of my belief is that ultimately love is eternal and that which is eternal can't be harmed. Very, like Course
Yeah.
in Miracles. Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately a person can't sell their soul. It's impossible.
Right.
But in the meantime, we do seem to have a good and evil thing going on in our physical existence for sure. Um, and
Well, both of these are mental frameworks, right? If you believe that you've sold your soul, that's one thing, right? And if you believe that it's good to do this or it's evil to do this, then that's another thing, right? And then the thing about good and evil is that it actually, one man's good is another man's evil kind of
right,
thing,
right.
depends
Yeah,
on
like
how.
I just saw a video recently of this boat going down this river loaded up with coal because West Virginia just had been released from the laws that were inhibiting
Coal production.
coal. Yeah, yeah. And this woman's on her porch just happy as can be, like, oh, thank the Lord. Like, look, that is just finally, like,
Because that's how her life has worked. That's sort of
right,
the context of her
right,
life is the coal was the lifeblood of the economy where she is.
right. That's what I think is very interesting when we think of change to aid all those affected by the change and with the change. You know, like we're talking about coal, like there's a whole lot of people whose livelihood has relied on coal for generations.
Well, one of the things that I can see into here is that if we recognize how stupid we're being and how far down the trail of self-annihilation we've gone and how much momentum we have behind going down that trail, it can easily turn into something that would be enough of a mental break because of all of the sadness and fear that goes with it.
Well, there's a group, I think they're called Oceans 40, that I started following on social media, I think Instagram or TikTok, and they show these videos of just mountains of plastic that they're pulling out of the ocean, like right on the beaches. Just like, if that isn't a sure sign of disease, I don't know what is. And
Well, it's both. That's what's so odd about it. It's confirmation of our worst fears about the way we're impacting our home. But at
Mhm.
the same time, it's also a reflection of the glimmer of the possibility of the cure, of the healing,
Yeah,
right?
but can you
And so,
imagine what it would be to eradicate plastic from use on this planet?
well, if you try to determine that as a deterministic final calculation, it'll make you crazy,
The
right?
fascia will start tearing.
If you do the math,
Fascia. What's it called? Fuchsia.
fascia,
Fascia. Is it
fascia,
fascia?
fascia, fascia,
Not fuchsia. Fuchsia's a color, right?
right. It's also a flower.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's probably a perfume then too.
Yeah.
And incense.
It's the color of my cheeks when I think of taking off my shirt on this show.
Well, let's see that.
Let's not.
I like your shirt, by the way. It's a good shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like
so what I was getting at was when we try to know, it becomes maddening. When we think we've figured it out, we can come to the conclusion that it's all futile or that it's all, you know, kind of crash down around us and there's nothing to do and that tragedy can spill over into a sense of futility and that can spiral into a fear cycle and a deterministic we're doomed, I'm doomed and nothing can help and this is sad, and then it just begins to feed on itself, right?
You know what? I'm just thinking of Trump and when he lost the presidency and how he chose anger instead of fear. Like, it seems like he was just like, I didn't lose. Like, he just wouldn't go there. And the more it was being pushed, like, no, you lost, the angrier he got until it erupted into this riot on the White House.
What's hilarious, this subject to me, because my dad and I were talking about it at the time, and I looked into for a number of years, there's some serious evidence that the electronic voting machines can be compromised in this country,
Oh, yes.
and they would leave no trace of being compromised.
Mhm.
And so, considering my bias against Trump, I was ready to believe like, oh, there's no way that this was fixed, that the election is fixed. There's been literally, I think there were like 60 different lawsuits that all came back showing no,
Were
that
there
it wasn't,
60? Wow, that's crazy.
right? And so on the one hand, my rational mind is, see, there was no way the election was tampered with, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, I understand technology enough to know that it's completely possible with electronic voting systems to leave no trace of the shenanigans, and that we've known about this for over 15 years. Like, there has been documentary after documentary made about this subject.
Right.
So this is great because the reason I'm able to mentally stay stable is because I can hold these two paradoxes in my mind at the same time without feeling disturbed by it, without having a cascade of irrational emotional
So
reactions come up.
does the idea that Trump was right, that he really was screwed out of a win, create any fear
Shempa,
in you?
fear? Um, Not really, because I see kind of the futility of the it's a Biden, Trump, it's like a distinction without a difference. And I think a lot of people would argue with me. In fact, I could argue with myself if I wanted to. But the reality is that there is a very significant sort of narrow bandwidth at which politics work, and it's not guided by the people. It's not guided by this idea of, we can turn left and do really great things. There's aspects of it, and it is really about a control matrix, right?
Yeah.
And it's, the current president, select, was just past this thing where he's forgiving a certain amount of student loan debt. And people are talking about that as if it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. And things tend to break down around those things along the same ideological lines, conservative versus Democrat, right? And so I just see this as another form of the muddling through reality that humans are in. Like we haul a pile of plastic out of the ocean, and now we have visible evidence that like there's huge amounts of plastic in the ocean, and we got some of it, right? It's like these two things at the same time, and it fits right into my paradigm, which is that the processes of growth and decay occur and are simultaneous, right? That's what samsara is, which is the Tibetan term or the Sanskrit term for growth and decay all at the same time. It's this juxtaposition of things. I also think that since we're talking about mental health in this context, that there's a thing where if in a society, a social construct that is inherently insane as far as survival of the planet and peace and spiritual healing, then to be awakened is to be insane by the versions of the by the judgment of the social contract.
Right.
So in one sense, it's not like we were talking about earlier. Is it a spiritual awakening or is it being crazy? Right. And Trungpa talks about crazy wisdom. Chogyam Trungpa, one of the great Tibetan scholars of the Western era, he talks about how crazy wisdom is the thing. It's like we kind of have to be nuts to have wisdom at this point.
Or Seal said, you have to be a little bit crazy to get by. What was that song? I just butchered the words.
Make me crazy. No, that's not Seal.
No. We all fuck it. Who cares? Seal.
Gotta get your MCT oil going, Greg.
Yeah, I better get something going.
Yeah, there we go. Another nap. That's just me.
I don't have time for a nap. In fact, I'm ready to call it a day. I think we've covered absolutely nothing very succinctly.